my favorite soccer team, AC Milan. Got a picture of Ibra in the background. They won 7-0 today, which is pretty crazy. Um, but in basketball news, the Celtics are looking like they're probably going to be in the play-in game after I thought they'd probably avoid it because they lost to the Heat twice, and Jimmy Butler was back from injury. So was Tyler Hero, and they beat us.
Yeah, we'll talk about them, go over them today. That's one of our topics today. Um, so yeah, it looks like both our teams might be in the play-in spot, but anyway, we'll go over that in a second. But regardless, let's jump right into the first topic here. I mean, obviously, it was last week. It was over the weekend, I believe, right against the Hawks. Russell Westbrook officially passed Oscar Robertson for the most triple doubles in a career. And obviously, I think we all expect Russ to continue piling on that record. And it's sparked a lot of debate over where Russell ranks all time, this and that, and regardless, I mean, I'll let you go. I'll just say this. I've already mentioned he's one of my favorite players to watch. He was kind of like Kobe in a way where you really hated to go up against Russell and his team because you know that they're going to give it their all that night, especially Russell. And he may not get a ring at the end of the day, but in my eyes, he's not the best point guard to play, but I think he deserves to be in that top 5, top 3 conversation, at least in my mind. Anyways, what were your thoughts in regards to the triple double record and just Russell Westbrook and where he stands in terms of his legacy?
Well, first off, I agree with you. I think Russell's also one of my favorite players to ever watch. I think he, along with guys like Dame and a few others, have sort of been counterculture to the way the NBA has gone. Obviously, there's a lot of loyal players like Steph Curry and all these kind of guys, but I think Dame and Russell right now are highlighted specifically in a lot of people's minds because their teams haven't won a ring. And especially now for like the Wizards, I mean, these guys are not really in a position to, probably win one. The Trailblazers, there's more hope there, but the Wizards, I mean, there's a long way to go. So yeah, I love Russell. I wasn't like, a big fan of him early in his career. Not that I disliked him. I just didn't, I was kind of indifferent. But then I was a big fan of Kevin Durant at first because, he's a UT guy. So sort of local grown guy.
I loved him too, man.
And yeah. And then the whole Warriors thing happened and I lost my love for Durant, and all of a sudden Westbrook sort of filled that void because he instantly like re-signed with the team, and everybody thought he'd probably leave and all that kind of stuff. It just made me respect him so much, and I think that when Jordan said that he saw a lot of himself in Russell Westbrook, I think that's what he was talking about. The I don't care, I want to beat you, I don't want to, all that kind of stuff. The competitive mentality that Kobe, a lot of these guys in the past had, where it wasn't about going and joining the best team. It was about beating the best team. So I love Russell Westbrook. And one thing that I think is interesting that I heard the other day is people were talking about Russell Westbrook's long-term legacy, right? And I feel like a lot of people right now are talking about it in terms of what they think of Westbrook right now. But as we've seen with a lot of players, when you retire and probably 15, 20 years after you're done, your legacy is very different than where it was when you first retired, just because of the way the game has changed, evolved, and the way that people remember you. Because, like, let's be realistic, in 15, 20 years, people aren't going to remember Russell Westbrook as the guy who shot a lot of threes and wasn't very good at making them. They'll remember Russell Westbrook as the guy who was the all-time leader in triple doubles, which is an insane record, first off, because the gap there in a player averaging a triple double between him and Oscar was like 30, 40 years. So the fact that he was able to break that was ridiculous, but then also, or not break that, but join Oscar in that spot was ridiculous. But then now the fact that he's broken Oscar's all-time record, he's averaged a triple double, I think 4 out of the last 5 seasons. He's doing something historically that you can no longer tell the story of the NBA without talking about Russell Westbrook. I think he has etched his name into the history books forever. But in 15, 20 years, who knows how people are going to look at him. I think the and this has nothing to do with Westbrook himself, but I think the way that people are going to look at Westbrook and his long-term legacy all depends on, will averaging a triple double continue to be this incredibly rare thing? Because we've seen a lot of guys like Jokic, Luka Doncic, a lot of these, incoming players that are starting to get closer and closer to doing that. And I think if a few guys do that same thing, then it might hurt Russell's long-term legacy, which I think would suck because, like we both agree, he's one of our favorite players to ever watch.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, I just, it's so hard to envision someone breaking that right now, just because he
I'm not
does it.
sure anyone will break
Yeah, but
like the
his,
all-time triple
yeah,
double record, but averaging a triple double, I think, will make it feel less special.
yeah, but someone else has to do it first. I think that's the thing, and like
Right.
we're kind of like they're guys. I get them, once a week, once in a while, but like not consistently. But yeah, and in regards to you're talking about legacy, I hate the people that sit there and say, "Oh, he's stat pads." Like, listen, it's an NBA game. There are other people trying on the other team trying to get rebounds, and his teammates still have to make the shot when for an assist, and Russell still has to score himself. So that argument is just it's just hate. Like, it's just in my eyes, it's just hate. Like, that's the only reason I can think of because yeah, like everyone's out there competing in the NBA. So, but yeah, I mean, I do feel like you're right in regards to that maybe 10 years from now, he might fade in regards to some people's memories, his greatness. Um, I, I hope
Once
in
again, though,
mine he won't.
if I think if that happens, if nobody averages a triple double
Yeah.
over the next decade, I think Russell's legacy will actually increase and people remember him as greater.
And to be honest, like it shouldn't regardless, because unless someone does it
Yeah.
for like not just someone, like multiple people do it for like the stretch that he's done it, like you mentioned, 4 out of 5 years, like especially in the modern NBA, it's just uh, then I will say maybe the other person would overshadow Russell, but he shouldn't. But I do agree with your original like thought process where he shouldn't be diminished because of that because he's yeah, I mean like we mentioned before, he's like the Jordans and the Kobe. He's just an ultimate competitor, and yeah, and the fact that and I just want to bring up too the fact that he did all that triple double stuff initially with that Thunder team that Durant left with real no shooters either. When you think about it, it was Steven Adams, good center, can't shoot. The rookie, very young Domantas Sabonis, who even now, like I wouldn't say he's a stretch. Shooting is not his first strength. It was
Right.
really his post play, and all that such. And then
And that was
Andre,
young
yes,
Sabonis too.
so he wasn't even as polished as he is now. And then Andre Robertson, we all know that Robertson was not a good shooter, and he's only there for one thing, and that was defense and layups. Which hey, I mean he did him. And then the only other person you could say was like Victor Oladipo, but then they ended up shipping him for. But then even then, like even the Thunder, even on like draft pick wise, I mean they drafted a lot of raw guys. It's not like they got ready now shooters in their draft. I remember the years they were getting like uh, Terrence Ferguson. I forget the other kid's name, but they drafted like a bunch of raw guys because they were always like in the 20s and guys that weren't really there to shoot. They were there for long term hope. And obviously, as we know now, they none of them panned out. So I think that's important to know with Russell. And then obviously with Houston, it just didn't work with Houston because just him and Harden, two ball dominant guys. It didn't really work, and Houston was kind of on its last legs, that team. So yeah, and then but the fact that he's done this with the Wizards, I hope people realize. Cause remember, they started off pretty bad, and they've lost their starting center Thomas Bryant, who's a solid center. I mean, they have Bradley Beal, but Beal's been in and out. They didn't really get main shooters, and other than that, like they don't have any other good like Bertans. They just have a bunch of role players, right now. And even then, like the only other good shooter, consistent shooter you could say is Davis Bertans. Really it. I mean, Hachimura is a good player, but he's still developing. This is his first full, real year. But even then, he's kind of limited. So, yeah, all in all, I mean, we're both on the same page here. It just annoys me the hate that Russell gets, and I hope that he gets his team to his Wizards to the playoffs somehow. I always love to see him compete, and I'm really excited for what they can do next year, the year where they don't get start off the year horrible because of COVID and things and new pieces, and maybe they add a piece of free agency and things like that. So I'm glad he's kind of revived his career because it did seem like a lot of people wrote him off, including myself mentally after what happened in Houston. So yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with him.
And I'll say this too. I'm not sure if the window has closed for Westbrook to truly, go after a ring either. Because if Bradley Beal does get traded this offseason, I can't imagine a world where the Wizards would keep Russell Westbrook just because of his age. I mean, without Beal, you're entering a rebuild, right? So I would assume Westbrook's probably gone too.
I think the issue is
And
the contract. I think that was the initial issue when
yeah,
Houston tried to trade him.
right. But hey, like maybe there's some team that's desperate out there. I'm not saying that
The Knicks.
yeah, I'm not saying that I think Russell Westbrook is necessarily going to win one because at this point in his career, it's going to be tough. But hey, there's still a chance, and I would truly love for him to win a ring, because man, that would just be so awesome that he would be able to win one on his own terms, and just have the legacy that he does and add that onto it. I think it would be a really cool thing for him.
I don't know, but yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, imagine if like he ends up like, gets bought out and finally gets to go to LA, like one of the LA teams. This is a final fu to Durant. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm gonna play.
I mean, I'll say this.
Like
I don't know if it would work with the Lakers
the
because
Clippers would
of
be a good fit.
how ball dominant LeBron is, and also AD needs his touches and all that kind of stuff. Because as we saw with James Harden, and I don't think LeBron is like James Harden level ball dominant, um, but as we saw with James Harden, Westbrook and another ball dominant kind of player, it just doesn't really work because unlike Kyrie Irving, he's not a shooter, so he can't necessarily become the shooting guard role when the other guy has the ball. But man, if he was on the Clippers, I think that would actually work really well because they have shooters, especially if they keep Ibaka, who's going to be a free agent after this year because he can shoot. That would be a really interesting fit.
Yeah. So, I was gonna say one more thing. I forgot. Anyway, but oh yeah, and my only worry is, I do agree with you. It's the window is closing because a guy like that who is relying upon it, his athleticism is his biggest strength. At some point, you got to worry it's going to go away. But hey, I mean, we're seeing guys like LeBron still play right now, so maybe Russell. I imagine he's taking care of his body. I mean, it's the way you can look at him and tell that. So I mean, maybe he's he can play that long. So we'll see how that goes.
He's never really dealt with injuries too.
He's only had that one knee injury
Yeah.
with Patrick Beverly when he was a few years ago. But then it's a few years ago, and he's probably fine by now. And that created a whole beef between them.